The enemies of mankind may employ dark sciences or alien weapons beyond humanity's comprehension, but such deviance comes to naught in the face of honest human intolerance, backed by a sufficient number of guns. The sheer scale of the battles fought by the Imperial Guard is dehumanizing in the extreme. Entire regiments of brave warriors are reduced to statistics upon the scrolling screens of Imperial strategos. They are but grains of sand sliding through the fingers of greater, more privileged individuals. Yet every single company, every single squad, every guardsman who lifts their lasgun and takes a stand in defense of the Imperium is crucial. For without a constant deluge of new recruits, the Imperial Guard would cease to function. A battle may see the deployment of millions, yet time and again it is a single heroic company who manage to carry their charge to secure a crucial gatehouse, armory, command HQ or other pivotal objective. Squads of desperate men battle impossible odds, with nothing but their courage and faith driving them to hold the line while their valuable betters are evacuated to safety. Every day that the Imperium endures, Imperial Guard stand in the face of beasts and entities more hellish than their worst nightmares. Men charge screaming alongside their comrades into the mouth of hell, lasguns spitting death at the foe even as Xenos munitions tear bloodied holes in the human ranks. In a galaxy of never-ending war, what makes the perpetually outmatched men of the Imperial Guard so admirable is that unlike the Astartes, they know near constant fear, yet still they lift their weapons, plant their feet and fight on regardless. Their lives may be short and brutal, their sacrifice disgracefully thankless, but it is because of the Guard that the Imperium continues to weather the storm of this dark age. Now recently, we've talked about issues relating to existing lore that I think could be potentially problematic, especially as 40k expands ever more beyond books and miniatures. The scale which defines some factions, the unresolved nature of some key scenarios, which at this point should surely have been progressed further. These are things that I think about with increasing regularity. But I wanted to lead with that powerful opening description because it sets up the weight of emotional immersion attached to one of the most defining factions of the setting, the Imperial Guard. My last video led me down a tangent of thought to a topic that I've often considered more and more, and that some of you have asked for years, which is, why have I not produced a definitive guide to the Imperial Guard? Well, I do plan to do that, but I think the reason I haven't felt compelled to do so yet is that strange issue I've talked about previously in how the lore and tabletop are inextricably chained together. One thing often informs the other and even dictates how it can progress. Which brings me to my topic for today, why Imperial Guard regiments have not been updated or better represented within the tabletop. Now, I appreciate that many of you are not interested in miniatures or the tabletop side of 40k, but whether you like it or not, it's an inextricable part of the verse. Also, I am interested in those things, and I have been for my entire 40k journey through my life. And paired with that issue is, as I say, this thing with lore and miniature releases tending to inform one another. And I think it is because of that which created something of a mental block for me. Quite obviously, this may well be a me problem, in the sense that because I came into 40k on the back of Rogue Trader in the beginning of 2nd edition, the Imperial Guard regiments really felt defining of the Imperium to me. Creed, Yarrick, and so on. Now, I really struggle to accept their complete absence, not those characters, but the regiments. Because even though admittedly they did a recent supplement for Talan within the Heresy game, this is a small comfort for those waiting for a range refresh for the better part of 30 years, which might sound insane, but it's also true. The Eldar have only been updated in the past few years, and until that time they were still using miniatures mostly unchanged since the early 90s, if you can believe. but do please tell me in the comments if you feel like this isn't just me and you similarly struggle with the steady omission of what was for many some of the most defining elements of the 40k Galaxy and Imperium in miniature form. Now, just as I've ranted many times about why they haven't reprinted or updated in an omnibus the Gathering Storm books, which is still incomprehensible to me, I also struggle to understand why they have not produced a box which provides adaptations and upgrades for Guard so that you could make any of the core regiments. Because quite honestly, the Imperial Guard should be getting a generic codex which provides adaptable army rules for all, and some specific regimental flavours of the more prevalent armies like Cadia and Krieg. Now, for any of you who are new to 40k, I'm going to finish this intro by answering the question that I should have probably started with, which is, what the hell are Imperial Guard regiments and why does this matter to anything? Which is fair enough. Well, in the real world, take an example of the British Army. A regiment is a permanent unit which may be divided into battalions, companies, and platoons. A regiment could be deployed independently or as part of a larger formation, such as a brigade or a division. Overall, the idea is to enable adaptability in warfare, strategic flexibility, sustained operations. In 40k, the application of organisational terms as it refers to different forces unfortunately shares the same problem as the underestimated numbers required for planetary campaigns. That is, inconsistency. Because the term regiment is applied broadly to an entire planetary force where army, or just their namesake title alone, would be more fitting. Sometimes they don't have platoons, sometimes they do. Sometimes they have companies or divisions, sometimes they don't. So, like so much of the Imperium, there appears to be no hard and fast specific framework which defines the way in which these terms are applied. There is plenty of source material which does, but then this can be contradicted later on. Now, if you wanted to do some gymnastic rationalization, it could be easily argued within the setting that such disparity is rooted in the differences between specific planets and regions of the galaxy. On the other hand, you might imagine that the Militarum, Munitorum, and Administratum would require a more set, specific organizational doctrine which was maintained across all of its forces. But still, that is the 40k galaxy for you and its planetary scale invasions using, checks notes, thousands of soldiers, or elsewhere millions, whatever. Honestly, I'll never stop talking about the scale of infantry used in 40k conflicts because it drives me mad. You'll have some battles for a hive city describing tens of thousands of soldiers, and then another one that's like 3 million. So it's all over the place. If you want to hear me talk more about that, video linked on screen now, titled A Major Flaw in 40k. Anyway, rather than being singularly used as a specific term for a group of guardsmen, an Imperial Guard regiment is used to broadly define a force of those who hail from a specific planet. And I think that's where the inspiration for the use of the term comes from, because in reality, a regiment has its own distinct identity, traditions, insignia, and generally will be drawn from the specific area of a country. So I think that's why it was adopted to fit 40k in that sense of a planetary regiment also adopting those same principles more so than just for an organizational structure. So Imperial Guard regiments, unsurprisingly, come most often from local populations, thus they are often heavily specialised and influenced by their homeworld's environment and culture, leading to the forging of soldiers as unique as their combat doctrines. An Imperial Guard regiment is expected to also function as a standalone force, with little expectation of reinforcement or any kind of rotation. They can though of course integrate into a broader military framework. Regiments tend to be deployed most often though in this singular entity form. And that's because they will often be assigned a mission or a campaign that's tasked specifically to their capabilities, be that siege warfare, death, world survival, or other extreme environmental conditions. Maybe they have astute historical experience with a specific enemy, and so on. All members of the Guard, though, are raised for war and expected to endure until attrition renders them otherwise combat ineffective. So I really wanted to just explore today about how regiments represent this broad spectrum of worlds controlled by the Imperium, and added huge flavour to the Guard beyond just standard Cadian Imperial Guard. Over time, many of these regiments like the Kadashan, Mordian and Talan were still represented in the rules to a degree, but although the look of the infantry regiments did not progress, generally it was still enough to get by that they were available at all. However, as we entered into the 8th edition, this began the slow, steady expansion of other units, and then also the narrative surrounding Cadia, which followed. And this was when the Cadians entered into the position of hailing from a completely destroyed planet, yet also bizarrely remaining the de facto default face of the Imperial Guard. To be clear though, the Cadians had always been prominent, ever since the 3rd edition when a massive display of their army was presented in the Codex. But in the past years we have seen them really fully embedded as the almost singular Imperial Guard regiment, with the others being steadily retired. Now, I've recalled before how when I started playing and studying 40k, the Ultramarines were just another Space Marine chapter. I chose them almost arbitrarily based on what my friends collected at the time. In fact, it was often the Blood Angels who had far more visual representation in the lore and models of that time. But over the years, the Ultras just gravitated to becoming the default, much as the Cadians do now. But despite collecting Ultramarines since I was 10 years old, I was never approving of their position as the face of Space Marines. In that way, the same goes for Cadia. And it's not to suggest it's not easier to just have one thing at the forefront, but then you can't just also ignore all the others that add to the rich depth of a galaxy-wide Imperium, because it's not merely a loss of aesthetic or tactical variation, it's just a sad erosion of the setting's depth to me. The Imperial Guard in its essence represents the broad adaptability of humanity when faced with an unforgiving, grim, dark galaxy. So the flavorful variations of the Guard are a living part of the lore and embodiment of humanity's ability to endure, survive and overcome the very worst horrors of the galaxy and its harshest environments. They do all this without receiving the blessing of being a genetically enhanced super warrior encased in nuclear-fueled power armor. So for me, their slow erasure from the game has been steadily more painful, because it makes the Imperium feel far, far smaller, and dare I say in some sense, less meaningful. This video today is sponsored by War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and it's completely free to play on PC, PlayStation, Xbox and mobile. Take command of over 2,500 meticulously detailed tanks, planes, helicopters and ships spanning 10 major nations, from classic World War II war machines to today's most advanced battle tanks and fighter jets. No hit points to grind against in War Thunder. Its sophisticated damage model means every shot counts. Target engines, fuel tanks, weapons or crew, and when a vehicle goes down, the X-ray mode shows you exactly how the destruction unfolded in stunning detail. Plus, War Thunder now has an all-new mobile version for iOS and Android, bringing the battlefield wherever you are. With 70 million players worldwide, epic PvP battles and multiplayer game modes from fast-paced arcade to simulation, there's something for every kind of player. And right now, new and returning players can get a massive bonus pack on PC and consoles when signing up through one of the links in the pinned comment or video description. The bonus includes exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 Silver Lions, 7 days of premium account, and multiple premium vehicles. But hurry, this offer is only available on PC and consoles for a limited time. Click the link, claim your rewards, and jump into battle today. The Dark Age of technology was, as we know, a pivotal, albeit shrouded, period in galactic human history. During this time, humanity reached the pinnacle of its scientific and cultural achievement. Within this and the stellar exodus that preceded it, humanity spread across the galaxy in a colonizing golden age of prosperity and discovery, only to then tragically collapse in a vast war, unable to recover before falling deep into the age of strife. Humanity, though, endured across a spectrum of preservation. Some had survived and endured their environments with the help of what technology remained. But it was the human spirit in the face of such things that enabled their ultimate survival. In many ways, the regiments of the Imperial Guard carry that torch forward and reflect this era, albeit through the grim dystopian lens of the 41st millennium. But that is to say that one of humanity's greatest strengths is its capacity for adaptation, be that ice-covered trenches of Valhalla to the irradiated dunes of Talan. The regiments of the Imperial Guard exemplify this, forged by the challenges of their environment, moulded by the trials its people have faced. And the reason I say that the Guard are so central to 40k's broader narrative is because this theme of adaptation and survival is fundamental. With Space Marines, they're the bulwark against the terror, but they endure by design. They accept their death as inevitable. Members of the Guard do not benefit from such adaptations or principles, with the exception of perhaps those from Krieg. Because no matter how they are deployed to die by the million, at the heart of each guardsman lies the human instinct to survive and endure, first for themselves and then the greater goals of humanity and the Imperium. Yes, and the Emperor. The Imperium survived only because of its ability to spread across the stars. It could only do so by adapting itself to fit the worlds it conquered. Because humanity does not merely occupy planets, it defines them. All of this, I feel, is of importance to how the Imperium and Guard are represented to us. And so in the physical loss of distinct Guard regiments, it removes this crucial theme from the tabletop, reducing the human warriors of the Imperium to a more monolithic force rather than an empire of 1,000 cultures, each struggling to persist in their own way. The underpinning concept of the Guard is that even in a universe of aliens, monsters, and immortal warriors, ordinary humans endure, and critically this is demonstrated by us being able to see that. Without the regiments, this vision is lost, replaced by a bland, interchangeable mass of soldiers devoid of meaningful identity, which admittedly in some respects is very 40k and very much how we could pull on the thread of human souls being the currency of the Imperium. But fundamentally, you know what I'm saying here, that in the loss of these regiments from the game, it severs a link to this important theme. The Imperium ceases to feel like the remnants of a once great starfaring race struggling to reclaim its former glory by deploying its soldiers in surgical campaigns due to the vast nature of the galaxy it oversees. Instead, it becomes nothing more than a dull, oppressive, faceless war machine. Essentially, it's like having the Imperial Army again. Take the Krieg Death Corps. They were so captivating because they were this horrifying anomaly. Rarely would you see them on the battlefield because of their insane Forge World prices, but also because people's own choice of a mix of Guard regiments had always existed. The Kadashan jungle fighters adapted to a death world where nearly every plant and animal can kill you in seconds. The Talan Desert Raiders, a product of their own planet's devastation. But now with the sheer prevalence of the Krieg, they begin to feel less horrifying. They begin to feel less like those specific forces from a specific world. What I'm saying is that when we're not talking about the miniature side of things anchoring the lore in a negative way, slowing it down, you can also see that it creates this very tangible engagement, which is a good thing. But unfortunately, with the loss of Guard regiments in this specific aspect now feels sadly a bit lacking. Ever since I began my 40k journey long ago in the dark fog of the past, the Imperial Guard always represented sheer resilience, discipline, and victory through overwhelming firepower. So it is a tragedy to me that in this era, the regiments of Mordian, Talan, Valhalla, and Kadashan that were once the core of the Guard that we saw, but are now only fragments retained within our memory. So as we briefly explore these historical regiments, note that I will omit for now Krieg and Cadia, as they're both heavily represented in miniatures. Plus, I've spoken to both of them before, especially in the case of Krieg quite extensively. So let's take Kadashan. It's one of the most lethal death worlds in the Imperium, its entire ecosystem hostile to all foreign life. Yet despite its perils, Kadashan supports a thriving population who have become known for their unparalleled toughness and cunning. The Kadashan jungle fighters, raised in this brutal environment, are physically and mentally hardened beyond most other unaugmented humans. For despite its extremely hazardous environment, Dozens of regiments are raised for the Imperial tithe annually, exchanging their service for essential supplies from the Departamento Militarum, which sustains their settlements in the unyielding fight for survival. Catachans are known to collectively fight as would any regiment, yet they customize their war gear and equipment individually. Each fighter wears a red bandana, symbolizing their blood oath, and carries a handcrafted Catachan fang. Because of their minimal attire, rank is marked by tattoos or additional blades rather than medals, and the conditions which raised them mean that Catachan officers endure the same hardships as their troops. They earn respect through deeds, not assigned privilege. Their leadership style is built upon this mutual trust, but it can also make integration with outsiders, especially commissars, notoriously difficult. So it is not only the Krieg who find themselves in abrasive situations with those who do not understand them at a fundamental level. Then there are those of Mordian, and these were always a favourite of mine because in many ways they represented the strongest of the Imperial Guard, the most disciplined and uncompromising. Their world is cast in perpetual night and the unwelcome attentions of chaos. This life is a grim existence where order is the only barrier against total societal collapse. Relentless drilling and combat training shapes Mordians into some of the most disciplined and technically capable troops in the Imperium. The Iron Guard regiments are renowned for their strict formation warfare, holding the line with unshakable precision even in the face of overwhelming odds. The most notable attribute in comparison to, say, the Catachan is that Mordians wear immaculate, brightly coloured uniforms, in stark contrast with the bleakness of their world. They value duty above all else, and unlike others that rely on stealth or just brute force, the Mordians are resolute. Their approach is one of precision coordination to wreak concentrated damage upon an enemy, be that saturation artillery strikes, close air support, or devastating las volleys in synchronized ranks. Their discipline extends to their morale as well, and this has given the Mordians a reputation as being invaluable in prolonged engagements where lesser forces would easily break. Another favourite of mine are the Vostroyans. Now, again, overlapping with Krieg, their world owes immense debt to the Imperium, but for entirely different circumstances. The Vostroyan Firstborn are elite regiments drawn from the cold, industrial world of Vestroya. Here, every firstborn son, by law, must serve in the Imperial Guard. This tradition originated during the Heresy and was due to the fact that Vostroya attempted to stay neutral, refusing to supply either side with munitions, which was its core production focus. Unsurprisingly, in the aftermath, this was not viewed well by the victorious Imperium. So now Vostroya ensure that they atone for their ancestors' failure with blood and sacrifice. For 10,000 years, certainly out of a sense of guilt and a stain upon the character of their world, but also in the knowledge that a far worse fate could await should they not appease the Militarum. Beyond the history, Vostroyans are known for their ornate weaponry and uniform, reflecting their planetary's rich history of craftsmanship. Their custom-forged lasguns, handed down through generations, are superior to standard guard weapons, much like, again, the Krieg. Their tactics favour ranged warfare, but they fight ferociously and quite capable of brutal close-quarters combat. Their fighting style may be more standard in some respects, but the Vostroyans are one of those examples I was talking about, where it is their respect for tradition, hierarchy, family honour that brings so much to the Great Feast. Upon Vostroyan, service is seen as both duty and privilege. Outwardly, their noble bearing combined with their weapons and determination to prove their worth makes them one of the most distinctive forces deployed by the Militarum. But I think my point is well proved about the loss of what makes the Guard and defines specific regiments when I asked a couple of community members recently about the Valhallan warriors of the Guard. All knew they were specialists in frozen winter conditions, but none knew why, other than the obvious that their homeworld is a frozen wasteland. The presumption tends to be that their planet from which they hail Valhalla was always a frozen death world. In fact, it was once a verdant paradise, but a comet struck the planet, and with such force beyond just the material being thrown into the atmosphere that it knocked the planet out of its standard orbit. Thus, the planet was then doomed to a perpetual frozen state, unable to recover its previous climate. So now classified as a death world, Valhallan regiments excel in warfare against overwhelming odds, particularly in, again, battles of attrition and siege warfare. In some respects, you might think this places them alongside the Krieg, but they have significant difference in their ability to weather environmental conditions and also to bunker down, wait out an enemy while they succumb to the attrition of weather. When a sufficient number of their enemy have perished or frozen solidly to the ground, the Valhallans would leap out to fight as if there were no conditions at all that would force most other Imperial Guard regiments to heavily atrophy. Their training emphasizes endurance, massed infantry assaults, and of course artillery barrages, making them both formidable defenders and relentless attackers. But their world's harsh conditions and society mean that Valhallans place self-sacrifice above all. They hold a deep respect for both comrades and commanders who share again in their hardships, like those from Katashan. The Valhallan warriors will fight with a confidence which stems from their known capability to endure brutal conditions, this meaning in their minds half the battle is already won. Then of course you have the Tallarn Desert Raiders. Now you start to notice a trend with Imperial Guard regiments in the same way as Space Marine trials, each more brutal than the last. So like Valhalla, Tallarn was also once a fertile world, its contemporary environment an arid wasteland. This change occurred due to a devastating Iron Warriors invasion during the Heresy. Firstly, the planet was subjected to extensive virus bombing, and those who emerged from the underground bunkers could not believe the sight of their planet now scoured of organic life. Worse, the virus was still present, and so all battles had to occur within sealed armoured units. Slow rolling engagements that are the standard fare of guard armour would have led to catastrophic losses. So the Tallarn preferred to engage with scout positions where they could then attack at the flank, steadily causing maximal damage before escaping the wrath of the traitors. In the contemporary time, Tallarn remains an extremely inhospitable planet, where its populace exists beneath the surface, living in vast underground cities, not dissimilarly to those of Kauth and countless others who suffered the worst engagements of the Heresy. The armoured conflict forged Tallarn regiments into an army specialised in rapid assaults, reconnaissance and vehicle warfare. Where others endure through attrition on artillery, the Tallarn favour speed, precision firepower and adaptability over raw brute force. This, combined with their mastery of desert combat, makes them experts at striking hard and vanishing before the enemy can retaliate, only to then outflank and finish the job. Tallarn infantry and vehicle companies are known for their flair and flexibility in battle. In their new life beneath the surface, Tallarn became known for its master craftsman and artisan customization of weaponry. Many of their officers are regularly seen to wield ornate weapons, both beautiful and lethal, in equal measure. Then the final long-standing force officially represented were the Armageddon Steel Legion. Armageddon was a heavily industrialized hive world, and I think the abridged version of the story is to say a planet ravaged by constant orc invasions. Now, those soldiers trained to fight in the toxic, ash-choked battlefields of their homeworld were known as the Steel Legion. They were known to be masters of mechanized warfare, favoring chimera-mounted assaults and armored spearheads over traditional grinding infantry tactics. Mobile infantry is effectively their battle doctrine. Clad in gas masks and greatcoats, they are a highly disciplined, pragmatic and relentless force, perfectly suited for the brutal urban and trench warfare which defines Armageddon's endless conflicts. Which again can sound familiar to other notable regiments, but it is their expertise in coordinated vehicle combat which makes them one of the Imperium's most adaptable regiments, whereas those from, say, Krieg depend on the steady withering attrition of an enemy to achieve their victory. Upon Armageddon, the Steel Legion experienced the grinding attrition of trench war just as they did open battles with fast-moving armour. They fought in close quarters proximity and vast industrial factorum. Often they would use their armoured columns of chimera within manufactorums just as they could in open wasteland. The focus for the Steel Legion then is to be relentless and highly adaptable, to strike fast and break the enemy into a disorganised rabble that can then be cleaned up with masses of infantry bursting from their armoured carriers. Their unending battles against the orcs made them hardened in a way many others of the Guard are not, and thereby ensuring that wherever they are deployed, they bring swift mechanised destruction to the enemies of the Imperium. Now, I thought it important to mention those who exist primarily in the lore alone, but present exciting opportunities to easily expand a force of God. So, the Ventrilian nobles, for example, a vibrant, well-outfitted regiment with a history of nobility, dueling tradition, and martial pride, most of whom are wealthy enough to find a way around service should they really want to, but societal expectations make abandoning a commission entirely unthinkable. And unlike other guard soldiers, the Ventrilians, rather than accept their lot as cannon fodder, will collectively as a regiment donate vast wealth toward Munitorum officials and rogue traders, usually thereby securing assignments in war zones which promise more in the way of glory and adventure than a miserable death cowering in a shell crater. They're also seen alongside their vibrant uniforms to unusually wield ancestral swords, quickblades, or Zweihanders. The planet Ventrilia's wealth of rare gems and minerals are heavily desired by the Mechanicus, who in return ensure a steady supply of super heavy tanks to the planet's regiment, not only ensuring the survival of those who join its ranks, but also making it a notably elite regiment in the Imperial Guard. In stark contrast, consider the Athonian Tunnel Rats, an extremely strange group to consider as a guard regiment, for they who count themselves among its ranks were born into a world of ceaseless bloodshed. For Athanos is a permanent battleground of feuding noble houses, fought through proxy gang warfare beneath its immense hydroponic spires. The lower hive streets and sewers are a complete war zone, and this has always been a fascinating aspect to Imperial recruitment, for often there is no discrimination as to the status or background of those drafted by the Imperial tithe. They could come from noble families or be criminals. All that the Militarum care about is that those who are enlisted are capable, and what better place to draw from than the brutal crucible of underworld war which fields hardened killers long before they're thrust into the Emperor's service. Consequently, the Tunnel Rats are masters of subterranean warfare, and where others would panic and quickly become disorientated, they excel in the choking pitch darkness of hive depths and mining world catacombs. They care little for the creatures that lurk in such places, for there is always something down there, in the dark, waiting to come out. They can readily handle the minimal oxygen, toxic effluent, and dangerous superstructures, all of which could prove lethal to anybody poorly experienced in surviving such conditions. And many have battled genestealer cults face to face, leading charges through the shadows with meltagun, flamer, and explosives. Guard staples are useless here, artillery and heavy tanks meaningless. If possible, they may thread some sentinels or chimeras through the passages of an underhive, but this is the only home they've ever known and will readily die to serve in that environment, hellish as it may seem to others. My last choice for underrepresented alternative guard regiments are the mourned loss of the Elysian drop troops, who until a little while ago were actually an available unit, along with so many though now sadly retired. They're particularly interesting, as like some of these smaller regiments, they represent those within the Astra Militarum who, due to local or environmental circumstances, produce more specialised and elite regiments, as opposed to the basic heavy infantry of larger guard regiments. The Elysians fill the role of an elite airborne regiment of the Militarum, hailing from the verdant, but shockingly not chemically or otherwise scoured, world of Elysia. They're renowned for their rapid deployment capabilities, deep striking behind enemy lines. They use grav chutes to execute high-risk aerial assaults, descending directly into combat zones from low-flying aircraft or even suborbital heights. Their regiment's combat focus is unsurprisingly shock precision assaults. Elysia's strategic location along major warp trade routes had made it historically a target for piracy, and this had the impact of creating an uncharacteristically skilled planetary defense force, service within which remains a prerequisite for joining the drop troops. Their selection process fosters exceptional marksmanship and tactical acumen, making the Elysians a coveted asset in any Imperial military campaign. This saw them often spread far and wide, utilised more as a precision tool than a bulk regiment for siege war, for obvious reasons. So Elysian regiments fulfill this specialised role in rapid insertion, high skill set operations, often deep into enemy territory. Their primary objectives are to disrupt supply chains and command structures. While they may well be indispensable in the Imperium's effort to maintain control over contested regions, they were sadly not indispensable for Games Workshop. Lastly, I should mention, if you want to see more about another one of these unsung regiments, do check my video about the Mordant Acid Dogs below, another force experienced in underground warfare. I've linked this below and at the end of this video in the outro screen. My conclusion today is this. Of course, we cannot expect every facet of the Imperium to be officially represented, and therefore one aspect of Warhammer that will never change is people's own creativity and masterful ability in adapting and kit-bashing miniatures to represent those who have no visible place on the tabletop. There are those smaller groups, as we just discussed, which have never been represented in an official capacity, yet people still take it upon themselves to craft and spend hundreds of hours forging their likeness, producing their own custom lore backgrounds, much like I did with my Imperial Knight Army. And my fundamental point is this. The Imperium of Man is not meant to be a monolith. It's not a smooth, streamlined military-industrial complex constituting Cadia and Krieg. It's a patchwork of barely compatible factions, doctrines and traditions. And while there have been many new units brought to the Guard even in the past months, rightfully we shouldn't decry the amazing forces of Krieg that are now available, this does not change the fact that there remains an immense void in the Imperial Guard. Where are the upgrade kits for the Tallarn, Mordian, Valhallan and Vostrolian Firstborn? The regiments of the Imperial Guard were once a powerful representation of what Warhammer 40,000 and the Imperium of Mankind represented to its core. A collective struggle for survival at any cost, endurance above all else, and adaptability no matter the environment. Without them, the Imperium risks becoming a little more of a grey, faceless empire. It loses the cultural variety that has made it such a compelling setting for decades. A homogenized Militarum, to my mind, does a disservice to both new and veteran players. Newcomers lose the ability or first-hand experience to explore different regimental identities and develop attachments to unique factions. Veterans who have built their armies around specific regiments can find their collections all but invalidated. It's not simplifying the game, it's erasing a part of what made Warhammer 40,000 special in the first place. The removal of distinct Imperial Guard regiments is not just a loss of miniatures, it's a loss of history, identity, and narrative depth. Because the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, is more than just a fighting force. It's a reflection of humanity's ability to survive against all odds. Each regiment is a story, a testament to the struggles of countless billions who endure in the name of the Imperium. Without them, the Imperial Guard becomes a shadow of what it once was, a soulless entity that fails to capture the true essence of Warhammer 40,000. The spectrum of the Imperial Guard, even in its basic core regiments, once stood as a mirror to the very nature of humanity in the Imperium. And I think that sadly, with primarily now only Cadia and Krieg really represented at a base level, we lose something irreplaceable. And despite me injecting a fair amount of tabletop perspective today, it's not just a matter of gameplay mechanics and aesthetic preference. It's the sense that not every battle is rammed with bastion survivors of Cadia. Not every siege war is fought with Krieg. For as vast and merciless as the ever-shifting galaxy may be, it's the regiments and their unbreakable human spirit that defines the Imperium of Mankind. Soldiers, each shaped by life upon merciless worlds of environmental and physical attrition, living just long enough to be sent to fight upon inhospitable hellscapes. The Guard is humanity in M41, and without them front and centre in their glorious ranks, from those who battle mud-choked trenches, suffocating hive depths and scorched wastelands, where we see humanity's will tested to its absolute limit, without the Mordians, Tallarn, Valhallan, Vostrolian, Steel Legion, and more, the Imperium feels ever more a cold, lifeless construct, stripped of the very struggle which defines it. Still, maybe that's the point. Tell me your thoughts down below about the Imperial Guard, their regiments, maybe your own collections, and as always, I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to check out War Thunder using the links in the description below. New and returning players can get a massive bonus pack on PC and consoles, which includes exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 silver lions, 7 days of premium account, and multiple premium vehicles.